to One Woman. I'm your host, Sharla Brown, and on today's show, we are talking with an amazing friend of mine who I've known for, over 20 years now.
Yes.
The wonderful and amazing Laura Fralick. Thank you so much for being on the show today,
Thank you for
Laura.
inviting me.
Yeah, so, I know we've talked about you coming on the show, and, you've just had such an awesome and incredible life. I'm curious as to kind of where it all began with Laura as a little girl and where you grew up and kind of, what you aspired to be when you were a little girl.
Oh boy, I'm getting older, so my stories are plentiful, but I'll boil it down to say I am a Thunder Bay girl. Grew up in northwestern Ontario, and Thunder Bay was an industrial mill, elevator type town then, not as diverse as it is now, but I learned at a young age. My parents would put us in the back of the car and take us right across the country, coast to coast. Always stop at the historic monuments, the Parliament buildings, what have you. So I learned about history, and then they started welcoming people from all different cultures and countries into our house long before we had Lakehead University or more of a global footprint here in Thunder Bay.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And did you know as a little girl kind of, what kind of a little girl were you? Were you curious? What word comes to mind when you think of yourself as the younger Laura?
Imagination.
Wow.
Yeah, we were the kind of kids, myself, my siblings, we'd dig holes trying to bury through the earth. We'd make castles and forts. I was a bit of a businesswoman. I ran a community newspaper at the age of 8 with the 4-year-olds on their tricycles gathering stories and laboriously copying them out. I always wanted that social interaction and being part of the community in that. And a bit of the businesswoman. I used to, in the high school washroom at Hillcrest, I used to sell my sister's artwork and beads during in between classes. So just once a businesswoman, always.
Right. Started early for you. Yes. And did you always know kind of what you wanted to be as you grew up, or you kind of learned that as you went along?
I learned as I went along. I was lucky I grew up in a time that if I didn't like one job, there was usually another job to be had. Those were the times. As long as you were able to work, there was usually something for you. But I didn't have a destiny or a specific career in mind at that point.
Yeah. So did you go to college or university? What kind of path did you wind up taking that way?
To my shame and my parents' shame, I did not. I was in a huge hurry to grow up. There was a very big teacher strike in my last year of high school, and so I went out to work and I started making money, and I didn't really want to go back. Had a nice loft apartment, and then I bought a house very young in my life. So I was just about go, go, go. And because I was undecided, I wasn't prepared to commit to education. But I will say, I always strived within whatever job I had to be educated within that job. So I would take the pertinent courses or technology in that to do well in that job. But that degree thing just eluded me.
Right. But always been a learner of life. Like that's the thing is that, I see you as somebody, Laura, that's always learning and always, getting involved and learning more in terms of whether it's community development or, immigration and newcomers to Canada, all that kind of stuff, that you are constantly a woman who's always learning.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think if you are a lifelong learner, you can get by. I think times have changed. The education is very, very necessary now. Doesn't mean you stop learning, but I know my daughter observed that in me. I'd have things at the kitchen table when she was getting ready for bed, and lots of reading even now, and certainly lots of education courses.
Right, right. And eventually you came into your role, which you're doing now and you've done for a number of years as a certified financial planner, probably one of the strongest women in finance that I certainly know, and very well known in the city for that. So what really guided you to want to do that as a career path?
Well, what happened with me, I was always a businessy type, so I worked in banking. I almost became an accountant, but not quite. There were aspects of accounting I didn't enjoy, but certainly creative problem solving was very interesting to me. But I went through a bit of a life crisis. I was widowed quite young, and I realized even though I knew words, I knew stuff, I knew banking, I knew accounting, I knew tax, I never had put it all together. And when I faced a personal and financial crisis through, being widowed, everything was right there. I had to say, oh, I'm at risk. And I don't know where I got the strength. I will credit my family and those close to me to get me through that bad part. But I realized I'm going to learn this, and when I master it, I'm going to teach it to other people. So it was a bit of therapy in the beginning. Absolutely.
And, I think that's a very common theme for a lot of women. You know, even older women who maybe weren't ever in the workforce, that, you know, their husband is the one who was the breadwinner in the family and didn't necessarily know what was all happening in the finance world until all of a sudden maybe that husband leaves them.
Yes.
They go through a divorce, or the spouse does pass away. And you really specialized in helping a lot of women over the years who've been in those circumstances.
Yes, and that's true. And a lot of women, some women run those matters for the household or in their own lives. Others gravitate away from it. But where I see women who are not engaged in knowing their stuff, at least having goals or concepts that they understand about their financial situation, I just say to them, think of your life, think of the big things you're trying to accomplish, think of the things that scare you. Understand that. Somebody can always explain a statement to you or how something works, but you have to know yourself, and you have to know enough to know if you're being properly represented, and ask for information. Check the credentials of the person you're working with. So you have to have some ownership in it, even if it's not your day-to-day thing that you're strong in.
Right, absolutely. So, you're also a mom.
Yes.
I'm curious as to kind of like what mothership has been meant for you.
It's funny with me. I just have one daughter who is well into adulthood now, and we've ended up very good friends. But I was a very strict mother, more than my own mother was. And so it's funny, it's blessed my life and made my life so different, and yet I wasn't the type of woman that woke up and said, I really want to be a mom. But when I was a mom, it was transformative. But my daughter learned very early that I always meant what I said. So she knew she was in really big trouble if my voice lowered and went softer. If I was yelling, everything was fine, but oh, no. And I really stuck to my guns. Sometimes it didn't feel good to me, but I knew I had to make sure that she knew I was serious. And she comments on those things today, but as a result, it's been a great experience with her.
Awesome. And you have not only went through marriage, but went through losing your partner in life, and having to go through that, and now you are in a wedding and a marriage with a wonderful partner and stuff like that. What have you learned from being a wife and being in that role, and what are the things that are important to you as a woman in that kind of a partnership?
Sure. So I learned that nobody can solve things for you. In my world, at least, I strongly believe that you're in a partnership for love, and the word partnership, you're there to support each other and perhaps bounce off each other's strengths and weaknesses. But at the end of the day, nobody can save you from your own reality. And I had to learn that. So I feel that now that I feel more resilient and strong, it actually adds to my current relationship. I know I'm secure in every way, regardless of what life will throw at me. But I think it makes me a better partner. I'm much stronger to help him. Certainly it helps our family income, and we have resources that I didn't have when I was younger.
Right.
So being independent doesn't mean that it's against somebody else. I love the word partnership. You come up together and you balance each other off.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back with Laura and talk more about her journey. Welcome back to One Woman. I'm your host, Sharla Brown. On today's show, we've been talking with Laura Fralick all about her life and story. And before the break, we were talking about, what it's like to be a mother in this world, what it's like to, have a partner in this world. And I'm curious as to growing up and even today, people who've been strong influences or role models in your life. And is that an important thing that you find for women to have?
Mm-hmm. It is. I think of one person locally who's very well known, Rosalind Lockyer. She founded the PARO, Center for Women's Enterprise, and she embodies many of the things I look for in a leader and in a woman. Compassion and humor, and yet she'll tell you she's not there to coddle you. She will challenge you. I remember one time being asked to be on a board of directors, and I'd never done this thing before. And Roz just laughed at me. I said, oh, I don't know. It's outside my comfort zone. I'm not sure if I have the skills for this. She says, you know what you do? You just dive in. You can do it. You hear that stuff, but in practical terms, a lot of us doubt ourselves. We don't realize the strength we have. And Roz very quickly can identify strengths in people. And I would say, I was saying to Sharla earlier that I look for strengths in every discussion. I find them day to day in my interactions. I'll see an example of fabulous behavior or strength in the clients I serve, in my community relationships, what people have gone through, and yet they manage to look at the positive things in life despite the hardships. So I'm always very curious to learn from others in that way, and
Right.
I guess that answers it.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's talking about role models and influences in your life. But you've very much been a role model and a mentor to so many people and so many women. Why is it important for you to play that role and to also be a mentor?
It might be a bit of age, self-actualization coming through. Why are we on this earth? And the big questions we ask ourselves. But I feel such gratitude for the life I have, and that time of hardship compared to other people's time maybe didn't even rate. But I am aware of the gifts I've been given, and so to me it's just a joyful thing, and it creates a life, it creates a community. So if I introduce somebody to another person, it's not to gain from it per se, but it builds this tapestry in our community, and makes for a richer life in so many ways. Does that help?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know you in terms of also be involved with so much in terms of newcomers to Canada and welcoming new people to Thunder Bay, and working alongside of the Multicultural Association for a number of years in terms of how you can kind of help and get involved and stuff. Why has that been so important to you? And tell me some of the maybe stories from doing work with women who are just coming to Thunder Bay.
Yeah,
and that's
I
new
could
to here.
jokingly say it's the food and the cultural stuff. It's always a lot of fun, and I'm treated very well. But again, when I went through that transition and a bit of a challenge and a hard time, I thought, oh, boo-hoo, poor me. And then I thought, no, my worst day is maybe somebody else's best day in some other place, or they're facing war, for example. Many of the people I've met locally are here as refugees initially. And I think to myself, what if I suddenly, as an English speaker, was plunked in the middle of Bangladesh and had to navigate the system? How would it feel? So it was just my interest and the way my family taught me to understand the world and be a student of other cultures that made me realize this is a big, hard thing. But it's also about making Thunder Bay stronger, because, and the North too, the region. We have a lovely city. It needs some work, but we need to welcome and build on the efforts and strengths of all our people. And so newcomers are a part of that fabric. And so I always wanted to just recognize what they went through to be here, what they had to give up to be here, but also the hope that they have for being here.
Absolutely. And I also know you, Laura, as a master networker in this city. Like you know a lot of people. You make an effort to build those relationships, get to know people, but not just for yourself, but to make connections. I've known that from you for over 20 years, as you always know whether somebody's looking for house renovations or insurance or somebody to cut the grass or whatever it is. You are a master networker and connector. And did that come naturally for you? And why has that been so important for you to do that?
It came to me probably in my early 40s, and at one time early on, I overheard someone say, oh, she's just dropping names. But again, you do it with an enlightened self-interest, and mine is because it gives me joy. If I know something that's going to help the next person, why would I hold that back? Why would I not share that information? Especially, you want to let a tradesperson in your house, you want to know their reputation, they come recommended. It builds a community, and if it helps somebody else get a connection or build their livelihood, why wouldn't I? And so it comes from a joyful place.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Well, I know you've definitely recommended some great people to me, so I'm thankful for that. So I'm curious if you could sit down and have a cup of coffee and a conversation with any woman in this world, dead or alive.
Oh,
You know,
no.
who would it be and why?
I really had trouble with that one. I probably went through a whole bunch of names, and then there were people I've read about that I actually forgot their name, and I was scrambling to think, who is that person? But I think the word tapestry comes to my mind. I take the wisdom of so many people and books I've read and try to put it all together. So I really have difficulty picking one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is tough. I struggle with that one too. I always look at that question and I always say, it's hard to pick one person. There's different people you'd talk to, maybe family that's for sentimental reasons, but iconic people in history that you'd want to ask questions to. So I can totally understand that.
And even, people like Viola Desmond or Nellie McClung in Canadian history, to get us to see women or women of color as persons. That wasn't even done 100 years ago or less.
Right.
So I really admire them, but if anybody out there wants to recommend some awesome books, I'm open to it.
Absolutely. I also know you as a lover of the arts. So I always see, Laura involved with Thunder Bay Symphony Orchestra, a lot of the art things that's happening here in the community. Where does that love for art come from? And you're such a big supporter of that in our community. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I feel art is sometimes seen as a luxury, but I think it's a foundational piece of being human. I know my husband and I had the fortune to explore the ancient caves in France and Portugal a bit too, but look at cave art that's been done, 15,000 or more years ago. And people were struggling to live, and why would they create this? So it's a connector of people and communities. It can be on a spiritual level. It might have been something to do with their ceremonies. And I find in our world today, it brings people out of a certain place. So say if someone's got a mental illness, or they feel isolated, or they have to express themselves, or they've been through a traumatic event, art or music or some form like that is often the thing that takes you to the other place. I'm not sure if any other animals do art. I think it's a human thing.
Right.
And there's something very transformative about it. And so it's often underfunded because we may say, hey, it doesn't add to our economy, but I would argue it does.
Right, absolutely. Well, we're going to take another quick break, but we'll be right back with Laura and talk more about her life's journey. Welcome back to One Woman. I'm your host, Sharla Brown, and if you are just tuning in, we've been talking today with Laura Fralick all about her incredible life and story and all the wonderful things you've been involved with. And I know in the last segment you talked about arts and culture and just how much you've traveled and seen all these things. But I'm curious about, you have been to a number of countries and just what travel has taught you in your life and seeing, women in other cultures, people in other cultures, what that's done for your life.
Yeah, so some of the message is environmental. It's such a beautiful big world out there, but it really kills me when I travel and I see the plastic and the litter and things like that. And I was thinking even, for the one woman message, maybe we can't change all of that. It seems so daunting, but what a small world. Here we are, we're talking here in Northern Ontario in Thunder Bay, and then next thing you know, we have a connection in Peru. We have a connection in Tunisia. It is global. So it helped me to look, big scale instead of down on the ground. But down on the ground, I realized little tiny things we all do will add up. If within our own families and circles and lives, we watch these things, because it's a big, beautiful world, but it's also can be a horrible world in some ways. So it's up to us to protect it. I also noticed around the world, we are very Eurocentric here. My parents are from England, Scotland, and I went down to South America and I thought, oh, somebody's going to speak English at the airport or the train station. Not so much. And it's a very good lesson. Oh, you people up there in North America, the world is not Eurocentric or North American centric. We think it is sometimes, not so much. So it's a humbling exercise, and it gives you some awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. And You know, Laura, I think of you as such a wise woman, you know, like you've lived a lot of things in your life. You've had a lot of circumstances, things that's happened, all that kind of stuff. And I always ask, you know, my guests, if you'd have advice to give a young woman in this world, you know, what would it be? Or things that you've learned that you'd love to pass on to that next generation of young women?
I would say that some of the gains that women have made could go back very easily. It has not been that long that we've had control over our bodies and reproduction to some extent. There are myriad issues, but at the end of the day, we're all humans. And I would say sometimes women are the biggest challengers to other women. So it's easy to, you know, have empathy or to talk the big talk, but down on the ground, you have to make sure that the things you believe in, you're creating the conditions for them to happen. For example, if you believe that women should be able to have children and be in a job, you have to put your money where your mouth is and make sure that that woman can thrive in your environment. You have to make sure that even if you don't agree with somebody or are critical of them or they're not your kind of person, that we don't bring them down. Because sometimes women and mothers can be the hardest ones. So in any place, anywhere in the world, that being kind to each other, and then that helps spread it. Be accountable for how you treat others and other women.
Yeah, absolutely. Super, super important for sure. Tell me a little bit about the most defining moment in your life.
Oh, I've had many moments, aha kind of moments, but one that struck me recently, I met a man, a businessman who I had known probably in 1993 or thereabouts, and he had moved away. I hadn't seen him for years, and he's back here now. And so we met in a business setting, and at that time I was in my 30s, and I thought, I'm just a little person here. I have no say, I have no impact, I have no role. I was in a supportive role in the office and in the relationship I was in at that time. And I was so struck when we reconnected. He said, "Oh, you were this, and I remember you ran that place and you always had his back and you did this and you did that." I never saw that in myself. I don't know why it took so many years. I'm in a happy setting here in my hometown, but I don't think we realize the impact we have on others, and sometimes we don't realize our own strengths either.
It's true. You know, you live your own everyday stuff every day. Sometimes you don't realize what other people perceive and the impact that you make on their lives.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So I know you're super humble, Laura, and there's questions on here that I know you struggled with, but you know, you are a very successful woman, very strong and very successful. And I'm curious as to if you'd share some of the secrets to your success, or what you feel has been, you know, some of the things that's contributed to your success.
Surrounding myself with people who are positive, because again, the world can be difficult, very nasty at times, or challenging. I'm lucky I skated around that, but I don't do well in a negative setting. If somebody's really complaining a lot, I need to hear something to give me hope. So I think hope and always having a bigger picture of what could happen has really helped me. Definitely mastering your craft. A lot of people want to do the fast track, but they don't get really good at whatever they're doing at that moment. So you do have to put the time in and master your skill or your craft, and then you hit another level. Always learning, but in a fun way. I wake up in the morning and I'm excited. I'm not, I have to go to work. I'm very lucky that way, but every day is a challenge. The day doesn't always go as planned, but I surround myself with really smart people, and I hire people who have skills that I don't have,
right,
or qualities that I don't have. So, and in my life too, my husband, he and I make a good partnership because he has skills and strengths that I don't have. So we make a great team, but individually we're missing something. So
absolutely.
I've always been one for partnership.
Yes, for sure. And also balance. Like I always think of the finances, the high pressure, you know, can be very stressful field, all that kind of stuff. How do you balance your life? Any hobbies, pastimes? I know you always joke about your basement band and stuff. So what's the other side of Laura that's not the businesswoman?
So definitely the arts, singing, and not quite ready for prime time, but singing and arts and being in those environments. Also the natural world. I find I live in offices and computer buildings, and I have to go out there and hug a tree or dip my toes in some water to get grounded again. But one thing I did do as my success started to build, it was at the cost of my health. And I had a few wake-up calls, which was a good thing. I didn't go over the edge, but I have to specifically carve out time in the day. For me, it's the early part of the day before everything starts to happen. And, there's lots of days I don't feel like going to the gym or eating the way I've been taught, but I feel that's given me a lot more energy, and then I can be better for those around me and be, more resilient. But I would say many of us sacrifice our health. Some of us don't have a choice. You have to do certain things, you have to work. But even if you just walk a bit more, climb those stairs, grow something out in the back, whatever you can do to harness that, because it goes by very fast and it can elude you.
Absolutely. And I'm curious as to the future for Laura. So, you've lived an amazing life so far. And I know sometimes you will chat about, you retiring and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for, the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah, it's a funny feeling when you're financially secure. You say, well, I could retire. Yeah, if I want to go on that trip, I can do it. What an amazing feeling to have. I didn't always have that, that's for sure. But I don't think I'll ever stop. But so much of my time now is about attracting people who are achievement focused. I don't really care if they have money or, positions or anything, but I'm very curious about people who are achievement focused. And you will find out there are a lot of people, not just me, but in the world, that if you are that kind of person, surround yourself with people that believe in you and will help you get there. I'm very interested in community economic development. So as I transition out of my practice and leave it for the next generation, I don't think I'll disappear entirely. I'm very interested in private investments in small business with a social purpose, and things like beneficial corporations, which are a specific thing that people can achieve in a business. So transformative business, but where people are putting their life's work and their money on the line to make a better community or make jobs for people. I'm very curious about that, and I'd like to help more in that area.
Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful, Laura. Thanks for being on the show today and sharing your incredible life story and all your future goals to just continue to help others in this world.
And thank you very much for what you do and everybody in your organization.
Thanks, Laura. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Be sure to watch next week with more on One Woman.